Hey everyone, it's Sevi. Yukong is our newest 4-star Harmony unit, and she brings some interesting new mechanics that have a higher learning curve than usual. To help you understand and unlock her potential, this video will cover her kit and traces, Eidolons, best relic and lit cone builds, team synergies, and gameplay tips. There's a lot to discuss, so let's get started.
Hello, guest from the Astral Express. I am Yukong from the Lawfu Skyfaring Commission.
Yukong's core buffing mechanic is her Roaring Bowstring effect, which gives her teammates huge attack and crit bonuses. However, this is also a source of many a player's confusion and frustration when it comes to using her. The first major step is to understand exactly how Yukong's abilities work so you can properly adapt her to your teams and playstyles. To start, casting Yukong's skill grants 2 stacks of Roaring Bowstrings, and you can only get a maximum of 2 stacks. As long as the stacks are active, then the entire team gets an attack buff. Yukong's own turn will not consume a stack after casting the skill, but afterwards, every time an ally completes a turn, 1 stack gets removed. Additionally, Yukong has her 130 energy cost ultimate. It deals imaginary damage to one target and enhances the Roaring Bowstrings buff by adding crit rate and crit damage bonuses to it. Unless she's E6, the Roaring Bowstring has to be active first for the crit buffs to apply. If you cast the ultimate first, then follow it up with her skill, then the crit buffs will not apply. With those in mind, we have to understand the difference between certain actions that do not count as turns and actual ally turns. Actions which are triggered outside of one's actual turn will not count as turns that consume stacks. The most important example of this is ultimates. For instance, in this scenario, I first activate Yukong's skill, which gives us 2 stacks. It's now Yanqing's turn, and I'll cast his skill and ultimate in quick succession. He technically performed 2 actions, but that still only counts as 1 turn since his ultimate does not count. The reverse is also true if it were the ultimate then skill. Therefore, only 1 Roaring Bowstring stack is consumed, and there's still 1 remaining on the next unit's turn. For a visual aid, you can see in the action queue that an ultimate action has this plus sign, unlike a circle sign which denotes a regular turn. So in practice, I can activate Yukong's buff first, then insert 2 or even 3 other ultimates by your allies. All of those will take advantage of the Roaring Bowstring buffs, but will not consume any stacks at all, as you can see by the stack count still at max. Now, there are some units with special advanced forward mechanics that allow them to instantly advance their next turn, like Sushang's ultimate or Danheng's E4 effect. So if, for example, Sushang moves right after Yukong activated her skill, then Sushang uses her skill-ult-skill combo, all those actions will be buffed by the stacks, and it totals as 2 turns, thereby consuming all stacks. There can be special cases though, most notably Zila. Her Resurgence extra turn effect is unique, as it does not consume any buff duration time. Notice that it's also notated by a plus sign instead of a circle. So for instance, if ever you do proc it while Roaring Bowstrings is active, no stacks will be consumed by the extra turn. Follow-up attack actions also don't count towards consuming stacks. So for instance, something like Clara or March's counterattacks or Himiko's follow-up attack can also take advantage of the buff outside their turns as long as a stack exists. I may not have exhausted all possible interactions here, but in essence, knowing what actions will or will not consume stacks can allow you to perform team rotations and combos that can make better use of the buff's uptime. Another key aspect is properly speed tuning your team so that Yukong's turn is optimally positioned. The goal is that Yukong should take her turn before the units you want to buff, preferably your main DPS and a sub DPS, to really maximize the damage gain, and speed determines who moves ahead of who. In this team example, we have the following speed stats. Yukong is faster than Yanqing and Asta, allowing her to cast her skill and gain stacks first, which will last through Yanqing and Asta's turns. When their next cycle repeats, assuming everyone's speed remains constant, then this order continues to persist. However, speed buffs or debuffs may affect this arrangement when you're in battle. In the same example, Yanqing actually has a final Ascension ability wherein if he scores a crit hit, he gets a speed bonus. It doesn't apply here because I haven't unlocked it yet, but when I do, that shift in speed can alter the turn order to make Yanqing move before Yukong. In that case, her 2 stacks will instead fall under Asta and Japard's turn, which isn't ideal. So it's important to also note if there will be any speed effects that trigger in battle and to adjust accordingly. In that example, Yukong had to be the fastest unit, faster than Yanqing. But this may be difficult to achieve consistently, especially if your DPS has innate speed buffing mechanics, and so an alternate setup is to actually just make her the slowest unit. In the same example, if Yukong has the lowest speed stat, then she won't be able to use her skill to buff Yanqing in the first first cycle. However, you'll end their first cycle with her skill. This means that her stacks will apply to Yanqing and Asta in the next cycle, and this can continue on and on. However, there's another potential issue you might encounter. There's a possibility that the DPS unit will eventually overtake Yukong after a certain number of cycles if they hit certain speed breakpoints. In this example, Dan Heng's turn started after Yukong, but after several cycles, he now takes turns ahead of Yukong. So if ever that problem arises, a fix here could be to make Yukong's speed lower by 1 or as close as possible to the second slowest unit. If your DPS overtakes Yukong, they'll very likely overtake your second slowest unit too. This way, the DPS's turn will still be positioned to have the second stack of Roaring Bowstrings. Or we could make Yukong the second slowest unit with a large gap ahead of your slowest, so that even if the DPS overtakes the slowest unit, Yukong will still move ahead for many more cycles. If enemies also afflict speed-related debuffs or disabling effects, that could also desynchronize your intended order. Advanced forward effects might also affect the turn order once they start triggering in battle. In summary, being aware of the speed stats of your units will also help you ensure that Yukong and your desired teammates are ordered for optimal use of her buffs. It does feel more convoluted to work with than your other Harmony supports, though with a bit of tactical know-how, the reward can be worth it. Now, if you make Yukong slow and unable to buff the target allies in the first turn with her skill, then the easy fix is to use her technique to initiate battles. Using her technique gives Yukong a world movement boost, and if she initiates a battle during this period, she automatically gets 2 stacks of Roaring Bowstring at the start of battle, which alleviates the issue. Or if Yukong has high speed, then using this can just let her use a basic attack at the start of battle instead of a skill for the skill point generation. Just note that if the technique is up and Yukong switches out, she loses both the movement and stack bonus effect, so she needs to be the last unit to activate her technique and start the battle. Another interesting aspect of Yukong's kit is her talent effect, which makes Yukong's basic attack deal extra damage and double its usual toughness reduction or break efficiency. This effect has a 1-turn cooldown. Depending on your preferred rotation, you might opt to use her skill most of her turns to keep her buff up consistently, meaning this won't see much use. There might also be rotations where you incorporate her basic attacks more often. Either way, if you want to guarantee an imaginary break or expedite a break, then this might come in handy. Finally, let's check out Yukong's Ascension bonus abilities and stat bonus traces. Her A2 ability lets her completely resist a debuff application once every 2 turns. This is a great effect to significantly reduce the risk of her getting disabled. Her A4 ability gives a 12% imaginary damage bonus to your entire team, making her an even more potent support in imaginary teams. At the very least, it boosts her own damage output too. Her A6 ability lets her regenerate 2 energy every time an ally takes action if the Roaring Bowstrings buff is active, which nicely helps with her energy needs. Ultimates and extra actions like Zila's Resurgence are counted, so that can add up to more potential energy gains if you take advantage. However, counterattacks and follow-ups will not trigger the effect. As for stat bonuses, she gets imaginary damage bonus, HP, and attack. When leveling her traces, you want to prioritize her skill and ultimate, as these are her major buff sources and her nuke damage source. Her basic attack and talent levels are up to preference as they only boost basic attack damage. Unlock her A2 and A6 abilities ASAP, whereas her A4 ability is most valuable if she's in an imaginary focus team. Yukong is already functional at E0 if you understand how to work around her mechanics, but her Eidolons give nice quality of life improvements for managing her better. E1 gives your entire team a 10% speed boost for 2 turns at the start of battle. While limited, it's still a boost for hitting speed breakpoints in early cycles. E2 makes Yukong generate 5 energy whenever an ally reaches full energy. This only triggers once per ally until you recast her ultimate, which will reset the trigger count. Interestingly, it considers allies that have full energy at the start of battle. Here I enter Yukong solo, starting with 111 energy. Now if I add 3 teammates with full energy, upon entering, she has 126 energy from her E2 proccing with each ally. But after I cast her ult and reset her E2, she'll no longer consider allies who already have their energy full, so to proc her E2 again, an ally has to refill their energy. E3 increases her skill and basic attack levels. E4 gives Yukong a 30% damage increase as long as Roaring Bowstrings is active, which is a nice personal damage boost. E5 increases her ultimate and talent levels. And E6 makes using her ultimate instantly gain 1 stack of Roaring Bowstrings, which is her most impactful Eidolon in terms of rotations. This can enable combos like extending the duration of her stacks to cover 3 ally turns, or instantly applying her crit buffs for 1 turn even without pre-existing stacks. Now let's discuss her relic build, starting with her stat considerations. In summary, you will have to make balancing choices to decide whether she gets more survivability or offensive potential. If you want more tankiness, go for defense and HP stats. If you want more damage, go for crit, attack, and damage bonus. Of course, you can always hybridize her main stats and substats to find your comfortable mix of tankiness and damage. On the question of using speed boots, it depends, as discussed in her speed tuning section. If you want Yukong to outspeed your DPS units, then it's very likely a must. You could also save different levels of speed boots if you need to tune Yukong's speed for various team scenarios. If not, then choose among attack, defense, and HP stats instead. As for her link rope, using ERR can help reduce her ult cost rotation time by 1 turn as long as you can hit relevant ERR breakpoints. However, it's still possible to achieve similar results with other energy sources or just settle for a longer rotation time, in which case an ERR rope won't be necessary. I'll discuss her energy and rotation management in a later section. You might also be wondering if it's worth building Break Effect on Yukong. More Break Effect increases how much her imaginary break damages and delays the enemy, which can help your unit get in more turns before the enemy recovers and takes their turn. However, remember that Break Effect is very conditional. If Yukong doesn't deal the breaking hit to the enemy, Break Effect does nothing. It's not necessarily worth saving her ultimate to guarantee she will break, since that also means putting off her crit buffs. Her basic attack does get added break efficiency, but it's not a guarantee she will always or often break the enemy. So if you're getting break effect stats, just be aware when and how to make it useful. Once you know what main and substats to aim for, you can then consider her relic sets. To start, a mix of 2-piece sets can give you the best flexibility and efficiency in choosing good quality pieces. Imaginary damage, attack, and break effect are your offensive options, while defense and damage reduction can be considered if you want more tankiness. For full sets, you could go for one of the 3 options. The 4-piece Wastelander set offers the highest damage potential by giving imaginary damage bonus and crit buffs. Any debuff gives the crit rate buff, but to get crit damage, the target enemy has to be imprisoned. You can inflict the imprisoned status either by breaking with any imaginary unit or using Welt's ultimate. However, it may currently be inefficient to farm its cavern depending on your account. Another is the 4-piece Musketeer set, which gives attack, speed, and basic attack damage bonuses. Don't forget to account how its speed bonus affects Yukong's turn order in your team. One more niche build is the 4-piece Thief set, which boosts break damage and gives energy when the user breaks enemies. We discussed how break effects conditions work, so keep that in mind if you're going for this set. For her planar set recommendations, most have speed requirements to unlock their second bonus effect. If you're building Yukong as a fast or slow unit, or if you have a speed buffer like Asta in your team, that determines if you're only getting the first bonus effect or the second as well. The Inertsal Soto gives crit rate and an ultimate damage bonus when the user has 50% crit rate. This is a damage-oriented option for her ultimate nuke. The Space Healing Station set gives an attack bonus to the wearer and more if they have at least 120 speed. This is another alternative set to boost Yukong's own damage. Fleet of the Ageless gives HP and, more importantly, a team-wide attack buff if she has at least 120 speed for boosting overall team damage. If you don't plan to hit the speed target, then this isn't as recommended. The Spratly Von Whack gives 5% ERR and advanced forward effect at the start of battle. The 5% ERR can help her achieve a shorter rotation when combined with other ER or energy sources. If Yukong has 120 speed and gets the advanced forward effect, be mindful of how this affects Yukong's turn order in the team. Lastly, the Talia Kingdom of Banditry gives extra break effect if you're banking on a break effect playstyle. However, the 145 speed requirement is fairly high, so unless you have high speed rolls or external speed buffs, it's unlikely you'll unlock the second bonus. Now let's go through Yukong's light cone recommendations and their unique advantages. Among Yukong's 3-star options, Chorus and Meshing Cogs are the best picks. Chorus gives a straightforward consistent attack bonus to your entire team, while Meshing Cogs gives energy whenever the user attacks or gets hit. The 8 energy gain of an S5 Meshing Cogs can help with her energy management, more so if you also have enough ERR combined with other energy sources. Moving on to the 4-star options. Past and Future features Yukong and is purchasable from the Forgotten Hall shop. It has a synergistic effect with her kit since it gives a damage bonus buff to the next ally moving after the user, which would very likely work in accordance with your speed-tuned arrangement. As long as it will buff your DPS unit, this is a great option. Memories of the Past gives break effect and extra energy when the user attacks per turn. Unlike Meshing Cogs though, you don't get energy anymore by being hit, so you have to rely on her ultimate and basic attacks to proc the effect, which might be limiting if you're using her in a skill-focused playstyle. Break effect is very situationally useful for her too. Planetary Planetary Rendezvous will give a team-wide imaginary damage bonus buff when equipped on Yukong, which is highly recommended if you're using an imaginary focus team. This nicely stacks with her A4's similar team-wide imaginary damage bonus. Dance 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 is a solid universal light cone. It advances the entire team whenever the user casts their ultimate to make your teammates move sooner, which can let you get in more turns overall in cycles. Carve the Moon, Weave the Clouds is a battle pass reward that gives a random team buff every turn, which are all useful. If you're a BP spender, this is one of the better rewards to get as a universally great harmony light cone, and will also be one of Yukong's best options. Finally, the 5-star standard light cone, but the battle isn't over. It gives the user very high base stats, more ERR, and a damage bonus to the ally after the user's turn when they use their skill, like Past and Futures effect. However, since Yukong's ultimate is an enemy attack, she won't be able to trigger the skill point regeneration effect. Still, the other effects are useful for Yukong energy management and boosting teammate damage. Now let's discuss her rotation and energy options. I'll indicate the minimum additional ERR needed and equipment combos that can cover those energy needs. Keep in mind these assume her A6 is already unlocked, but don't consider her E2 or instances of her getting hit. Without any extra ERR related equipment, Yukong can have a rotation of 3 skills and 1 basic attack per ult, but of course you can do 4 skills instead for more buff uptime. To neutralize the skill point consumption, she can afford a rotation of 2 skills and 2 basic attacks per ult, but she'll need an ERR rope or an S1 cogs/memories of the past. Yukong has 3 turn rotation options too, but naturally these will need more energy equipment. Putting on a max level 5-star ERR rope allows her to do 3 skills per ult, but if you want to substitute 1 or 2 skills for basic attacks, you have to add on combos of an energy light cone like cogs or memories of the past or Spratly Von Whack. You can base your rotations on how much buff uptime you want, available equipment, and your team's skill point economy, then adjust depending on other combat factors and scenarios. Finally, let's discuss Yukong's team synergies and considerations. There are many team templates that would benefit a lot from Yukong's support utilities, and you can weigh what the pros and cons are when choosing her over other harmony options. Yukong is focused towards providing large attack and crit buffs while having potential to deal decent single target damage. Other harmony supports also provide damage-related buffs while having their own unique perks. Tingyun has her battery ability, Asta has her speed buff, and Bronya has her advanced forward mechanic. One advantage is her rare imaginary typing, so she has some upper hand against imaginary weak units by contributing more towards breaking them. Since Yukong's buffs can also last for 2 turns or potentially extend to 3 turns at E6, this makes her a great pick for teams with 2 DPS units. Of course, she'll still be good for hypercarry teams with 1 main DPS. As discussed before, ally ultimates and follow-up actions won't consume Yukong's stacks, so some units can take advantage or adapt to this mechanic to maximize it. For example, Zila's Resurgence does not count as an actual turn, so in practice you can get more mileage by triggering Zila's extra turn once or even twice while a Roaring Bowstring stack is active. Jingyuan's Lightning Lord also doesn't consume a stack, so he doesn't take away from the 2 teammates who will want the buff too. But you have to be aware in making sure Lightning Lord takes his turn while Yukong's Roaring Bowstrings is active. Clara is also another example, since she can keep proccing counterattacks and they'll benefit from Yukong's buffs but won't consume the stacks. Since Clara is typically the slowest and the last in the team lineup, you will want Yukong to apply the buff right before Clara and or the enemy's turns, so that it's active while most of the enemies are attacking. A similar setup is for damage over time or DOT-based teams. DOT applied from ally abilities deals damage when the enemies take their turn. So if Yukong's attack buff is active while the enemies are taking their turns, she'll be able to buff your allies' DOTs as well. But note that DOT effects cannot crit, so her ultimate buff will be a bit more limited. Anyway, we'll see how Kafka introduces new synergies here when she comes out. If you have teammates with instant advance forward mechanics like Su Shang or E4 Dan Heng who can take 2 turns in a row, then they'll quickly consume 2 stacks of Roaring Bowstring. Of course, Yukong will be an amazing teammate in dual or mono imaginary team comps thanks to her A4 bonus, and more so if you have the Planetary Rendezvous light cone. So far, we only have Weld and Locha, but as the roster grows, so too will Yukong's value as an imaginary buffer support. Consider how Yukong will fit in your team's skill point or SP economy as well. If you're using her in an SP negative rotation, which is very likely, then you want SP positive teammates to compensate for that. This could change if you opt for skill point neutral or positive rotations, in which case that will also impact your SP management. And that's it for this Yukong guide. Let me know in the comments if you've tried her out and what you think of her. She definitely needs a bit more brain power to make full use of her buffs, but don't sweat it if you find it difficult at first, since it might take some time and practice. After all, Yukong's had about 200 plus years to master her combat, so perhaps we'll need some patience as well. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like, consider subscribing to my channel if you haven't already, and I will see you all soon. Take care!
The sea of stars is vast, and our journeys are difficult and long. Please look after yourself, no matter where you are.